It is 3 o'clock on the West Coast, so we're at a slightly different time than normal, but that's all cool. So, welcome everyone to the final Power BI meetup of the year for this group. We are still going to be doing one more Excel one, but this is our last Power BI roundup for the year. So it's our Thursday, November 21st edition, and apparently I have not clicked in the right place to allow my keyboard to work yet. So there we go. As always, we're going to just do a quick start off with thanking the sponsors that make this possible. Skillwave Training, the website that I run with my partner Matt Allington, where we teach you how to be better with Power Query, Power Pivot, Power BI. If you're looking for some fantastic training and using the Power tools in the Microsoft stack, you should definitely come and check us out. Excel Guru is the parent company of Skillwave and also the developer and distributor of Monkey Tools, my software package for Excel that helps you build better data models faster and does a lot of other things as well. Actually, it's kind of grown up to be a pretty big tool compared to what it originally started with. The next meetups that we have coming up, we've got our friend John Peltier who's going to be coming back for our last meetup of 2024. This is going to be on Thursday, December 5th. We'll be returning to our usual time at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And John's going to be talking about charting with VBA, his two sort of main areas of practice. So it should be a great session. And then our first session of 2025 will also be an Excel session, but we are not telling anybody what that is yet. It's going to be someone cool. It's going to be something cool, but we'll have more announcements on that closer to the end of the year. I haven't released anything massively new in Monkey Tools since October. That's the last time I've had a chance to actually do any big updates on it. But the biggest things that we released on that were some better license management capabilities, a new DAX indenter with some different options, so you can choose how you indent your DAX, and lots of bug fixes that have gone into that. Got a few more on the list that I want to get to, of course, but those should be hopefully coming out before the end of the year. If you're interested in checking it out, you can always go and do that at monkeytools.ca. We also, of course, have a free Using Monkey Tools course. So if you're trying to figure out all of the different features that are in there, what's free, what's not, how to work with it, and whatnot, the cool things it can do for you, there is a free course that is hosted at Skillwave, which will teach you all of the cool things that Monkey Tools does. So you can decide whether or not the software is for you to use, or you know what, if you are using it, you can figure out how to use even more of it. The last kickoff calls for the year for my coached training for the Excel Fundamentals and SSBI Academies kick off on December 11th. That looks like about a few weeks away yet. If you are looking, you or someone on your team needs some help in sort of rounding out some of the knowledge gaps in your Excel journey as far as formulas or pivot tables and data visualization, this is a fantastic course. It comes with lots of video, comes with the live access to my live Ask Ken Anything sessions during the year as well. And it's a great course for people that are trying to upskill and just sort of get more comfortable with your Excel basics. If you're already past that, you're looking to unleash Power Query in the data model, we also have our Self-Service BI Academy. This is my premier training program where we look at Excel, we look at Power BI. I give you copies of my software, my books, my recipe cards, all kinds of good stuff in this. You should definitely check this one out. This is a huge course, but if you're looking to really up your game, this is a great course to allow you to do that. And the last, or pretty close to the last thing I'm going to say here, just a note here, this meetup, as are all of our meetups, are all recorded. It will be posted on the Skillwave YouTube channel. It usually takes me about 24 to 48 hours to get it all sort of, processed and uploaded and whatnot. But once that happens, we will post on the meetup site to let you know. Of course, if you're already subscribed on the YouTube channel, you'll get a notification as soon as it's live as well. I see the comment from Wyatt about Excel add-in of the year with Monkey Tools. I hope it will be. It has been nominated. Now I think voting comes up sometime in December. But yeah, hopefully Monkey Tools will make that list. That would be pretty cool, I think. So my last slide here. Just a quick note here. If you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to come speak to our meetup group, we would love to have you. All you need to do is fill out this little link here at excelguru.ca. Speak at VanPUG, and we'll get you on our stage. We love hearing about anybody that's got cool things that they're working on with Excel or Power BI or anything in the Power stack that integrates with these tools. Let us know. We'll get you into working with these things, or get in touch with us, and we will get you on our stage. And on that note, actually, we're going to come back to the speakers in a bit. First, we're going to break out for Joseph. Joseph, it's time for the What's New in Power BI for November 2024. All right. What you got for us today, my friend?
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, we've had It came out on the 12th, so I don't know how many days that is. It's like over 10 days
Oh,
to
wow.
figure out what we're going to show. So this is...
You've got this mastered this time.
I've had a lot of time to doubt myself. That's
excellent.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ken, and yeah, welcome everybody to the last meetup for the Power BI track in the meetup group for 2024. Crazy to think about. The year's flown by, but as always, I'm going to do just a little review of some of my favorite features from what's new in Power BI this month. As always, I like starting with the Microsoft feature summary blog. I obviously can't get through all the new updates. I just like picking a few of my favorite ones and do a quick demo of it. But if you are interested in everything that's new, whether that's new like preview features, previous preview features that have become generally available, or just updates to existing functionality, be sure to check out this blog post here. And there's also usually YouTube videos with small little demos to sort of exemplify exactly what these new features are. So there's been a couple Copilot and AI updates, Copilot in the Power BI mobile app and Copilot summaries and subscriptions. Those are pretty cool, but I'm going to focus on some of the new features from the reporting category, starting with the, what am I going to start with? Actually, let's start with modeling. Let's start with the DAX query view. So for the last couple of months, probably back almost to the beginning of 2024, we've had a new view in Power BI, the DAX query view. And if you do attend this meetup group regularly, you'll know that I'm often in this query view with all the new features and functionality that have come to it. And it's really revolutionized how I develop my solutions in Power BI, and I always speak very fondly of it. So we do have a new quick query in this view. So why don't I jump into Power BI and we'll see what I mean. So if I go into the DAX query view on the side here, we'll have like a little default query to pull up. And one thing that we've always been able to do is we can right click on one of our tables in our data model in the pane to the right hand side here. So I'm just going to go my fact table, and we have this quick queries option. And usually this allows us to do things like define all of the measures that exist in our table, even define all of the measures that exist in our data model. I'm going to have a new quick query, which is going to save us a little bit of typing, define new measure. And so what it does is it provides us a little bit of boilerplate code just to speed things up a bit. We already have the define and measure keywords populated for us in a new query here. We already have our table name, and we have a placeholder where we can enter the new measure name that we want to create. And there's also like a placeholder function here as well, count rows on our fact table. So if I wanted to create a new measure, like, I don't know, average balance, something like that, we could just replace our keywords here, those placeholder keywords, with something like average. And we can select a specific column from our fact table, like balance. And so super quickly like that, we've been able to define a formula. We'll have to update the name average balance here as well. There we go. And if I execute this query and I hit run, we can see the results down here in the bottom. So just saves us a little bit of typing. We don't have to do quite as many of those keywords. We get some placeholders in, and it can help speed up as we're developing new measures, which is great. If I just flip back to the blog post, the two other features that I'm going to do a quick demo on are small multiples for the new card visual, which I thought was really cool, and then a new visual of a text slicer. So both of these are in preview, which means that we have to go into our report settings and make sure to toggle them on. And just before I jump into Power BI, I do want to call out that there are two actually dedicated blog posts just to these new features as well. I was able to navigate to them through that Microsoft blog post. Within those sections, they bring you up to a LinkedIn blog post, new addition to the card visual, small multiples, and then drumroll please, the new text slicer is here. So let's jump into Power BI and we'll look at what these two things look like. So if I head back to my report page, and we have this nice blank space here, and one common request, I guess, to have on a Power BI report is just some big summary numbers, whether that's like just important KPIs or some like big number that we want to have in our report. So in our case, if that's like total balance, if I just drop that into the report, then we get a card visual. And if I wanted count of clients, I can drag that in here as well. We get another card visual. And if we have a couple more numbers, we can keep like dragging fields in and doing card visuals. And then it comes to formatting, and it's a bit of a pain. And if we have a lot of them, it actually becomes quite resource intensive. And it can lead to some performance issues with our Power BI report page if we have enough of these things. But what we can do instead of just creating a card visual and a card visual, is if I create a new, the new card visual here, I can add multiple of my measures just into the card visual. So I have something like total balance like this. And if I add count of clients and make it a bit bigger, now all of these things are displaying within the same visual. And that's pretty cool, but we have had this for a little while now. One thing that we're able to do now is add small multiples to our card visual. And this adds an extra dimension to our card visual. So rather than showing the total balance for everything and the count of clients for everything, we can start seeing these measures calculated across different attributes or different dimensions of our report. So if I take client type, for instance, and put that on our small multiples, I'm going to have to do a little bit of formatting so that it's a little bit easier to see. But we can start seeing total balance and count of clients by other dimensions in our data set, similar to how we would use like a matrix or a table visual. But it's really quick, really slick that it can do this. And we have lots and lots of formatting options, which is covered in the blog post in great detail. They actually do a really good job in the blog post of going over all the different formatting options. But rather than spend the next few minutes just formatting and adjusting colors and font and text and stuff like that, as fun as that would be, I'm sure, for everyone, I'm just going to hide this and unhide one that I did earlier. But we can format it to look something like this. This is obviously just an example, but a way that we can see how we can really format each of our different attributes uniquely to make them pop and stand out. We have different shapes, font colors for the callout values or the labels, everything really. And this is all just within that same card visual. So it really looks, if we think back to Power BI just a couple of years ago, it wasn't really possible to get something looking slick like this so quickly. So this has been a great update, a great feature that I'm excited to incorporate into some of my Power BI reports. As I said, the last feature that I want to look at is the new text slicer. So within the build pane or wherever we create our visuals, we have a few different slicers now, one of which is the text slicer with an A and the little lightning bolt. So if I add that to my report, I'm just going to put it in the blank space here. What this allows us to do is, rather than filter from like a drop-down menu or in the filter pane, rather than having to do a drop-down and select like text contains or does not contain or starts with or whatever, directly within a visual on our report, we can start typing in and filtering our data set. So to start with, and for this demo, we need to add a field from our data model into this visual for it to work, because we want to slice on something in our data model. So I'm going to use client type again for this demo. So I add that to the field well of this of the text slicer. And now I can just start typing in text. So if I do YOU in client type, and we look down here underneath at our the small multiples within our card visual, we have young adult and youth. So if I just type in YOU and I commit that, we see that our entire data set, all of the visuals in our report update, and we're only returning items that contain these YOU letters within our client type column within our data model. And so I can go, and if I just delete that and commit that, let's close these panes down. This works as well just with full words, like if we do golden, we only want to look at golden, we're only getting that category, or even just subsets of the word. So it gives great flexibility to our users if they maybe they don't know exactly a keyword of what they're looking for, or they just want a way to quickly type something in if it's a long list, like a list of employees or a list of clients. They don't need to go from a drop down or even search from a drop down. They can just type in directly into the text slicer here, and they're able to quickly filter the report. So this is a really cool update to slicers and a new slicer visual. And again, I can definitely see some use cases where this will be very useful in certain reports. And with that, it's 3:15 on the dot, actually. I'm surprised I did it that quickly. But at this point, I'm ready to wrap up. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for coming out for all of 2024. I'm looking forward to 2025. And I'm excited to pass it back to Ken and start with the feature presentation.
Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate that. I feel like I threw a gauntlet down to make it 3:15 for you, but well done. That wasn't the intention. So awesome stuff. Thank you very much, as always. Really appreciate it. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome Dan and Jocelyn to our stage at VanPUG here, and they are going to be talking about Power BI performance troubleshooting today. So Dan, Jocelyn, I will turn it over to you.
All right, Jocelyn, you want to bring the deck up?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jocelyn Porter. I am a data engineer with, with 3Cloud Solutions, and I have been working with data modeling for about 5 years now. So I'm incredibly passionate about helping you to make sure that your models are completely optimized so that your reports and visuals are working as appropriately and faster than if it wasn't optimized. So thank you so much for having me. Dan, go ahead.
So my name is Dan Szepesi, and yes, I do spell it phonetically there so that you remember. So I've always been obsessed with performance, and as I bounced around in my field from server ops into SharePoint and then into Power BI, SQL, all that kind of stuff, I'm always obsessed with performance. And so this presentation, we're going to talk a lot about what some of the things I do a lot of times, or as things are brought to me, just kind of running through tools and all that kind of stuff, because I certainly do a lot of other stuff, but anytime I hear somebody on the team talking about a performance issue or something like that, my ears just perk up and it kind of comes to me anyway. So appreciate the chance to blabber on about it this evening. If you want to go to the next. So let me talk a little bit about 3Cloud. We both actually worked for Blue Granite, which is a small consulting firm, and then we were bought up by 3Cloud. 3Cloud's a pretty hefty size consulting firm at this point. But the cool thing is I've always been a Microsoft fanboy, and there are too. The owners came from Microsoft, and really the focus is on Microsoft Azure. I guess the one asterisk there is that we're pretty heavy into Databricks as well, but even that is hosted in Azure, so that's at least sort of Microsoft. So we span really, app dev into platform services and all the way, but really the core thing is we're all about data. That's what we live and breathe. Go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. And so specifically, the group that Jocelyn and I are in is called Managed Data. And so I don't know, this description changes every time I talk to different customers, but at its core, it's support consulting. But we're also consultants that we've come out of developing reports and pipelines and all that kind of stuff. So we can do all that. But what we really try to do for our customers is help them understand their business intelligence solutions, optimize them, make sure their organization is trained and understands how to use them. We do ongoing support as well, and that's where a lot of the performance stuff comes into play. Is things start, having problems, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of times, to be fair, a complaint you hear about consulting engagements is that a consulting firm will come in, they will create a big whiz-bang POC or a solution, they will roll out, and suddenly it breaks. Nobody knows how to do it. Nobody knows how to work it. And you don't get the value out of it. And so that's a lot of what we try to do, is come in and help customers continue that value, get that value from it, and actually optimize in that. So I specifically spend a lot of time in Power BI, although more and more Databricks and Data Factory. But we've got expertise from Power BI to SQL, the whole bit.
And now AI.
And now AI, yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the chip hasn't warmed up yet. Yes, everybody's focused on AI and ML, so it's always AI everything.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. Well, thanks, Dan. Just to go over our agenda for this afternoon, we'll start out with a bit of Power BI architecture, a little bit about what Power BI is encompasses Power BI, a little bit of its history, and then the second half of this presentation will be more demo heavy, mainly going over what happens if you are encountering slow visuals, slow refreshes, or capacity performance issues, and then sprinkled in on there, we'll add in a couple more slides just overarching on import models, or import modes, really specifically, and Power BI and Fabric capacities. So without further ado, let's start out with a little bit of Power BI architecture. Now, just to preface, I know this group is probably very familiar with Power BI, but for those of you that are watching this video in the future who may not know what Power BI is, Power BI is a collection of software services, apps, and connectors that work together to turn your data sources into interactive insights. So whether your data is in an Excel spreadsheet or a collection of cloud-based or even hybrid data warehouses, Power BI lets you easily connect with your data sources, transform them, visualize them, model them, and allows you to create beautiful reports as an end product. So Power BI is composed of three main parts. That is Power BI Desktop, which is a Windows desktop application, Power BI Service, which is the online service, and Power BI Mobile, where you can take your reports on the go. For the purpose of this demo or this presentation today, we will mainly be focusing on Power BI Desktop, and that is mainly because Power BI Desktop is the main powerhouse behind data modeling and where the source of most optimization problems can arise. So heading over to a little bit more about Power BI Desktop itself. Power BI Desktop has a lot of capabilities, but the three main drivers of the platform are the ETL process, which is extracting, transforming, and loading data using Power Query and data connectors. So if you have a source in Excel or any other source of data, you can connect through Power Query and do some transformations so that you are cleaning up your data to make sure that is in the most pristine condition before modeling your data. Next up is data modeling, and this is really the meat and potatoes of Power BI Desktop. This is where you can create relationships between dimension tables and fact tables, and it really has that full force of the full SSAS tabular engine behind it. So that is the capability, or that allows you to model your data as efficiently as possible, so that you can package it all up into nicely formatted visualizations. And these visualizations represent the end product for your reports that users can interact with and really tells a story about your data. So really, all three of these tools are really important when it comes to performance. At the root, if you have a data model that is not fully optimized, you may see an impact on everything downstream. So if you don't have a fully functioning data model, you may see slow refreshes or slow visuals to load, or even capacity issues. So we're here to talk a little bit more about what that looks like, how to come to those conclusions, how to pinpoint what exactly is going on based on what you are seeing in Power BI. So what happens if your visuals are too slow to load, or if your refresh is taking too long? What should you do? To dig a little bit deeper, we are going to start looking at the architecture and engine behind Power BI, which is SQL Server Analysis Services. So in order to do that, let's understand what it is. What is SQL Server Analysis Services? It seems like honestly, it's just a lot to say, to be completely honest with you. But to break it down a little bit further, what it really is, it's a data engine, aka VertiPaq, that allows you to create semantic models for business intelligence, data analysis, and reporting tools like Fabric, Power BI, Excel, and reporting services. So it really is that driving force behind allowing you to create those data models. So essentially what Power BI does from this point is it wraps that ETL or Power Query process and visualizations around that engine. So they're almost extensions of the core engine of Power BI. So what does this look like and how does this work in Power BI? First, you want to create your semantic model in the Power BI desktop using those best practices, making sure that you are creating good relationships between your tables. From there, once you have optimized your model, you'll want to publish the Power BI model to the service. From there, you can connect to the underlying data model and create reports. And then those reports can be shared across the organization in the Power BI service. So that is from beginning to end process of creating Power BI reports. So now, for those of you that are a little bit more visual like myself, let's take a deeper look into a more visual version of what's going on behind the analysis services architecture. And thankfully, we have a really nice screenshot here from our friends over at SQL BI. Don't worry, we asked them for permission before we included this in our presentation today. But really, this shows the end-to-end process of what goes in behind analysis services and its architecture. So Dan, if you had anything else to add on this slide, I know you always like to chime in here.
Yeah, if you got on the call early, I was fanboying over Ken and his book as being one of the things that started me out getting deeper into Power BI. But really, the story behind SQL BI is when I interviewed for Blue Granite the first time, I really thought I knew Power BI pretty well. I could make all sorts of reports. I could make data sing, all that kind of stuff. But I hit an absolute brick wall. And anybody that's been a Power BI developer knows there is that point where it's all going nice and easy. And then you get to a point where you suddenly have to use DAX or you have to understand what a model is. And it's just like you splat into that brick wall. And it was a humbling moment. And my gosh, I don't know what I thought I knew. And so what I turned to was SQL BI. They have a bunch of video series. This is a clip from one of them. I think this is from Mastering Tabular, which is one of their courses. And I love the clip itself because what we're talking about is that far right side of that middle box there, that tabular DAX VertiPaq direct query. But I think it kind of just gives a good overall view of that. And if you've been with Power BI for a while, you know that analysis service engine is in there. It's kind of, Power BI is the Excel people on the phone, I have to be careful here. It's the unholy marriage between Excel and analysis services just smashed together, right? And so I love this picture, and definitely if you are looking to learn more about troubleshooting performance or really getting into DAX and DAX performance, these folks are the best in the business for sure. Sorry, I know you do training, Ken, but for that kind of stuff, I turn to them. All right, go ahead, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Dan. Alrighty, so since we sped through that, we're going to start with a demo. So let's set the stage here. You created a model that you were super excited about, published it, you created a report, visuals are looking good, and then you realize that when you switch pages, one of those visuals is just taking so long to load, and it's frustrating because you work so hard to get those DAX measures all right. So what do we do in that situation? And my resolution is to go into the, let's see, performance analyzer here. So just to set the stage as well, we currently have a demo file here that has 2 pages. The first page is a blank page. The second page contains a really slow visual that we've handcrafted to make sure that it is slow. But what we're going to want to do here is first pull up the Performance Analyzer tab. So I'll have to click on it twice to make sure it pops up. And then we're going to want to start recording here. And what this does is it records every single action that a user takes. So whether or not it's interacting with specific visuals, switching pages, it records all the processes behind the scenes on what it takes to display these visuals. So from this point, I will navigate to the page with the slow visual. And you can see that we have our little ants marching in a circle here. And we'll see what it spits out and see how long it actually takes. I had a version of this take up to 24 seconds at one time, so that was really interesting. Alrighty. And now that it's fully loaded, we can see that this table took about 15 seconds to render completely, which is a long time in my opinion. But to dig a little bit deeper into here, you can see that the DAX query itself that makes up this table is the main culprit behind this. That's the item that took 15 seconds to display. Another thing that I want to call out here is this other category. So this other category can signify that there are too many visuals on the page. I know we only have one here, but it's a common problem with some clients that they have way too many visuals on the page. So if you have a long duration here, it can be indicative of the visuals just waiting on one another to load completely. So it would be a good idea at this point to minimize the number of visuals that you have on the page, especially if you have those with poor performing DAX. Alrighty. So from here, you'll notice that you can copy the query. Now you won't be able to see it here, but if we select Run in DAX Query View, we'll be able to see the code that is, or the DAX code that makes up that visual. And a couple call outs here, you'll notice that Power BI does this thing where it tries to simplify or creates variables to simplify the calculations as much as possible. As well as that, you'll see this top N function. And basically what this is saying is that results can be calculated up in chunks of around 500 at a time. So for example, if you're waiting on a table that you know has more than 500 rows to it, you'll be able to scroll down with the scroll bar, but if you hit a certain point, you'll see it kind of lags a little bit. At that point, that's when it's grabbing those 500 results at a time. So this is really cool if you want to visualize the DAX code that goes in behind your visuals, and you'll also see the resulting table underneath. So from here, what you can do is either copy the code that is generated in the DAX query view, or what I'll do is I'll go back to the report view and I'll select copy query here. And then I will go to the DAX Studio external tools here. And we'll see. It always pops up on the wrong page, so we'll see if we get lucky today. Oh, we got lucky today. Awesome. Alrighty, so now that this is pulled up, one thing that I wanted to note here is that you'll see the local host here. I have localhost 54317 down here, and that is basically saying that it is connected to the same port that is open in your Power BI desktop. So that is the same model that we're connected to currently. Alrighty, so to view the server timings within DAX Studio, what we'll want to do first is to turn on server timings by selecting this button. And then another thing that I like to do personally is also turn on the clear on run. What this does is it essentially clears the cache whenever you run a query so that you don't have any extra things lagging in your DAX Studio. So from this point, I will paste the code that we had copied over in Power BI Desktop, and we'll select Run here. And you'll see that the query down here is started. So typically when I notice a a visual that's taking too long to load, it usually takes about that time to get the query started from start to finish. So I can only expect it to take about 15 seconds, and here it is. So once we have this query batch completed note, we can navigate over to server timings here. And I'll make this a little bit bigger for you. Alrighty. So now that we have server timings pulled up, we can see exactly all of the queries that are taking place just to recreate this DAX query behind our Power BI visual. So as you can notice, we have a ton of these that are more yellow than blue. And that is basically showing us that a lot of these calculations are taking place within the formula engine versus the storage engine. And typically we would like to see a lot more blue than orange. And that is because the formula engine is single threaded. So typically if a Power BI or a DAX calculation is a little bit too complex for the storage engine to handle, which typically handles compressed data, the storage engine has to decompress that data and then hand it over to the formula engine to perform that difficult calculation. And when that happens, it can only handle one query at a time since it is single threaded, and it takes a little bit longer, and that can be indicative of a performance hit. So if we scroll down through some of these calculations, we can notice that there are some bolded line items here, or some bolded queries. And we can see here that that is indicative of a callback. And that callback is essentially what I was mentioning before, where the calculation is a little bit too difficult for the storage engine to handle. So it decompresses it, hands it off to the formula engine to take care of. And it typically, if you have a bunch of these callback values, you can probably bank on needing to optimize that DAX query overall. So if you're seeing a lot of the calculations being formed in the formula engine versus the storage engine, you should take a look at your DAX queries and make sure that you are doing the right thing, and see if there's a way to optimize it from that point forward. Alrighty. Dan, is there anything that I've left out here that you think would be beneficial to add?
No, you crushed it. The clear on run, there was a comment in there about good tip on that. You know, what will happen if you don't clear on that run, you'll run it the first time and you'll get a number 17 seconds, and you run it again and suddenly it's 12 seconds, or it's like there's a lot of caching that goes on. I've also done this connecting to Power BI Desktop, and if I want Power BI Desktop to like force the query again, I'll connect with DAX Studio and use that clear cache button, which is right next to where she had. DAX Studio is a whole session in of itself. It's got that really cool format query stuff in there. If you're playing around with DAX code, you can highlight it, hit format query, and it will put it in their anal retentive format that has to be the exact way, or they start to smoke at the ears. I think you hit everything. I mean, just
perfect.
If there's any questions here, can you sort by duration? Yes, you can click on the top of those columns there, and it will sort higher, sort low. You got to scroll. There you go.
I'm too low.
Yeah. And that formula engine, storage engine thing, that's a whole piece of itself, and optimizing that is really 400 level stuff, and doesn't always work. I mean, but I think it's what Jocelyn said is a really good thumbnail. If you see 99% of your work in the formula engine, you're probably got a slow query, because it really is. Storage engine is super fast. It can read compressed data, but it's dumb as a rock. The intelligence is no formula engine that's super slow. So they have to work together well, or and that's really how I just made this slow, is that I made it do something that the formula engine had to do. That's why it's so slow.
Right.
Oh, one other thing to point out, sorry. Under the SE CPU, if you see that X0.0 and that top one, that's telling you it's basically just use a single thread there. I think that's the one that tells you how many threads it used. Well, it says 29 queries, but one thread. That's another number that, you want that way up there because you want it multi-threading and able to operate efficiently. But I think it only used one thread. Boy, I wrote a really bad query.
Yeah. Well, and another thing to point out, I just remembered. So the query over here that you pull up, when you select a line item, this is XML. So it's pretty simple when you, or if you're familiar with SQL. Or is it XML or
XSQL?
XSQL. Yep.
Yeah.
XQL. That's what it is. So if you're familiar with SQL, then you should be able to read this pretty simply. So just keep in mind, it's not going to be DAX when you pull it up in this view. All right. Thank you so much. All righty. So now that we know exactly what you can do when you're seeing very slow visuals to pop up, let's explore a little bit more about what it would take to discover more about slow refreshes. So in order to give a little preface to Dan's first demo, I'll go over a little bit more about the Power BI storage modes. And it's important to note that Power BI does have three main storage modes: import mode, direct query mode, and dual storage mode. Dual storage mode does use VertiPack, but for the sake of this demonstration, we're only going to be focusing on import and direct query mode. So just moving forward from there, import mode is based on that VertiPack engine. It is where data is stored in memory as a snapshot. Data can be refreshed periodically to bring in new data. And just a little tidbit here, it is the most frequently used storage mode in Power BI. It is pretty simple and straightforward. We will go into the process behind the refresh itself in the next couple slides. But before we do that, let's go over direct query mode. Direct query mode, initially no data is loaded in the data model. Power BI Desktop sends queries directly to the underlying data source as you want that data. So it is retrieved at that query time. Data resides in its original source before, during, and after the query execution. So there's no transfer or no duplication of data during this process. So now, since import stores the data as a snapshot, to get the new data, we will need to do a refresh. And typically, this is where we can tend to see some problems if there is a very slow refresh happening. So what is happening during a refresh? I know a lot of us don't really have a lot of insight as to what is going on behind a refresh. It's not like Power BI is showing this right into your face. But essentially, the very first step when you perform a refresh, especially when you publish a Power BI service, is an import semantic model is published to the service and a refresh is kicked off. After that refresh is kicked off, Power BI then creates a copy of the model that includes the new data. And essentially what this does is it doubles the memory footprint during the refresh. Now, caveat, there is an option that you can clear the cache before this, but more typically you'll see a duplicate of memory during refresh if that is not the case. After this is duplicated, Power BI then switches to use the new model, and then you'll be able to see all the fresh new data during the refresh. So it's hard to know exactly what's going on, or during a refresh, but with SQL Profiler, we can get an idea if there's any slow data sources that are delaying an import or anything that's really impacting that refresh. All right, Dan, are you ready for scenario number 2?
Yep. So what I'm going to talk about is a way that you can get a better look into what's going on during that refresh. Because if you have a large complex model, if you're doing something where you're joining models together in Power Query or you're merging them and all that kind of stuff, things could get really, really slow. And you see that pop-up comes up and it just tells you that it's processing rows and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start sharing, which will probably help. Let's see here. Let's go here.
And Dan, I believe you're referencing doing a local refresh, right?
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how to connect using SQL Profiler. I'm going to connect to Power BI Desktop, and I'm going to do a local refresh. Now, that should tell you something right in and of itself. We keep talking about analysis services. The reason we keep talking about it is the main development studio, Power BI Desktop, when you launch it, you have a fully functional version of SSAS, SQL Server Analysis Services, running inside of Power BI Desktop. Because it's got that SSAS engine, I can connect to it with tools that I'm familiar with from the SQL side, like SQL Profiler. Probably be a stretch to say I'm familiar with SQL Profiler, but I can do enough things with it. If you remember, Jocelyn talked about using that external tools link. If you have DAX Studio loaded, the code will load up here in your tool doc, and you can launch DAX Studio. Why am I doing that? Because I need to know what port this thing is running on my machine. So I'm on a different machine than Jocelyn. She had a different port number than I do. I just popped this open, and now I can see that it's running on this 49959. That's going to be important because I need to connect SQL Profiler to that. So I'm going to say new trace, and I'm going to choose Analysis Services. And every time I forget, just can't remember, 49959. So 49959. Now, before I connect, I'm going to mention that you can also do this to connect to an XMLA endpoint in a premium capacity or fabric capacity. You know, if you want to do this on a data set in the production, you can do it this way. You put that XMLA endpoint in here, and then you can attach to it and kick a refresh off in the service. I sometimes have had problems with that, so I typically will try to do it in Power BI Desktop. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to connect into that port, and it's going to pop up this option here. Now, key to this is we're actually going to do use the blank template because we're going to pick the particular pieces. I'm just going to save it when I'm done, so I'm not going to worry about any of these settings here. That template that I chose there, if you do standard and you come over here, you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff checked off. This log that you're going to capture is chatty enough as it is. So we're just going to skin it down to, we're going to go XML, so job graph events. And by the way, I'm going to give you a link towards the end of this where this is all coming out of a blog post that Phil Seamark wrote years ago. And literally every time I do this presentation or every time I need to do this, I go search for his blog post and bring up the instructions because I don't do it that often. But we're just going to do job graph and then progress report end. Okay, so really I just want it to tell me when something finishes. So I've got those two set. I've just clicked here and then leave all the defaults for the particular columns that it's going to select. And now I'm going to start the profiler running. So now it's just sitting here at this screen. It's attached to my desktop. So I'm going to go back to this here. This is the same AdventureWorks 2019 model that Jocelyn was demonstrating. I'm going to come here to home and I'm going to kick off a refresh. And so there's always this moment where it spins. This is usually where I'm sitting here wondering like, oh, is this going to hang or something like that? If we flip back to here, we'll see it hasn't even really done anything in the engine yet. This is all just within Power BI Desktop trying to get itself together. So there's a bit of a pause here. While this is thinking, any questions on this so far? Let me actually pull up also. You throw Phil Seamark's blog post in the chat. It'd be really nice if it starts responding.
Done and done, Dan. I got you.
Oh, you got it already?
Mm-hmm.
Now what am I going to do to pad time? Well, we're evaluating. There we go. And once this starts, it's going to be very fast because it's literally just a SQL server on my laptop that it's pulling this data from. It's actually the AdventureWorks model that you can get from GitHub, or sorry, database. So again, all this stuff is going on here. Now you can see it start to pull data in. If I flip over to here, now you can see I've got stuff that start to fly by. And so you can see each one of these progress report ends means something has finished, a command has finished or something like that. And you could kind of see, if you were to click through some of these, you can get that sense of, you know, as it's processing the particular hierarchy there or a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. This is a table in there, dim product. This job graph is what most of the information comes out of. So that means we're done if it's logging that. So see, we're done here. So now I'm going to go back into Profiler. I'm going to stop the trace, and I'm going to save this trace. And I'm going to save it as a trace XML file, not a trace file, trace XML. And that is because of Phil's template that he uses. So we're just going to call this trace1. Okay. And then I am going to open up, where was that? It's in that directory. So in his blog post, he has a, pull it up here, show you over here. Whoop, sorry, wrong thing I pulled over. So he has this template called Analyze My Refresh. Actually, is it Analyze My Refresh? That's the one I did. Let's try this here, PBAS engine. I hope that's the right one. I had it all set up, thought I did. So his template is we're going to point it to that XML file, load that in, and then he's going to render the data. That's not good. Hang on a minute. You did not see any of that. Why is that? Crash, boom, bang. I'm just getting a bonging in my ears. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there we go. Try that again. Yikes. I'm completely hosed. Let me try launching that. If it doesn't work, I'll just pull the blog up and talk through it. It'd be much more exciting to actually, well, much more interesting to see it actually load from here. I've got that previous one when I did this. We'll see if it comes up or not.
Dan, you got me laughing over here.
It's the demo gods. You know, they always joke about that. There's nothing more exciting than doing a live demo because it's just like, are we going to crash? We worked the previous 3 times I tried this today. Yeah, see, we're not. Okay, so let's talk through this a little bit. And then, so in this blog post, this is what we did here. We kicked off the refresh. We ran this and we imported this PBIX that he has here. And I love this fact that it's still on OneDrive. Oh, it said empty. Oh, goodness. Oh, there it is. Analyze my refresh. Maybe it is a PBIX. I could have sworn it was a PBIT. Let's try that one then. We'll get our act together. I'm sure everything will run well with now 3 instances Power BI Desktop running. So let me go back to here in this blog post. So we've done this run a trace. If you want to go back and do this yourself, I mean, he's got great instructions. The great thing about SQL Profiler is it hasn't changed in 100 years, so it still looks the same. And what we're going to hopefully do is to be able to see each one of these represents a table, and then we'll be able to see, like, as far as, you know, who took the longest. I'd be looking at this Excel table. That's funny. That's the example that comes up. It's always Excel. So let's see here. What do we got? Let's just go in here. And inside of this PBIX, there is this parameters field. So I should probably slow down. So I'm going to go to transform data. I've opened up that PBIX that you can down from there. And I'm going to say edit parameters. Now, this is probably, if I had spelled it right, the last time I did the demo, I was close. Remember, I called this trace once. This is becoming a tradition of me spelling things crazy in here. Remember, I did that on the last one too. Let's try this here. And we'll do that. And so now I'm pointing it to the file I just generated, and I'm going to click refresh, ironically enough. to have it load in that XML, and then it should give me a visual breakdown here of where I spent my time in that refresh. How long did it take? You know, what was the slowest? What was the fastest? Now it's all kind of silly because this was 50 seconds total, you know, but you can get the sense that right away, even without messing with this report too much, you could see where the longer processing time was spent, you know, on these. And I'm pretty sure these are merges from a fact table, and that's why they're taking longer. And you've got some basic information here. This one, you know, it read the most, and it has the most rows per second, right? So it's not exactly, it's not the, even though it's got the most rows, dim employee took longer because of that processing bump there. So what do we take away from this? Let's back up a second. This data here, when we get to Log Analyzer and we're talking about it, this is all the diagnostic logs that's coming out of that analysis services engine, either inside a Power BI desktop, which we just connected to and showed here, or if you could connect to it in the service and profile it that way, or as I'll demonstrate later, you can now set up at the workspace level, you can have your workspace log this information into a log analytics workspace. And then hot breaking news at Ignite, they did talk about the workspace. The admin monitoring workspace is now in preview. I don't know if it's going to start showing up. I haven't seen it yet, but apparently they have been doing work to let you get access to that data across the entire tenant instead of workspace by workspace. So that'll be interesting to see, but that just came out, so I haven't been able to see that yet. So we didn't show a lot of the columns here. All we were doing was this progress report end. There's a ton of information. And again, when I talk about log analytics, I'll go into filtering that down and trying to get something out of that. Any questions here?
We got a question in the
bumbled
chat.
Around on that. Okay.
And that is, what exactly does processing indicate versus execute SQL?
So I think, and this comes from this execute SQL is when it's actually moving data versus manipulating it, I think is what the breakdown is there. Let's go look here real quick.
So Dan, would that be akin to saying something like it's similar to somewhat to query folding, where execute SQL would just be, hey, look, I'm just reading the data from the data service, just stream it down into me. But when we actually get into processing, now we're actually processing local with local CPU and RAM. So that's where it's going to be slower. Is that really what we're supposed to be taking from that?
Yep, that's the way I understand it. I've never really dug too deep into it because I'm usually looking for this. You know, when I'm doing performance stuff, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for, is what is standing out.
You're not sharing your screen anymore, by the way.
Oh, you know, you can't see that. It's so critical. Let's see here. I'm just having a great time, Jocelyn. I'll tell you what, I'll always be invited back to Vancouver. All right.
So good, man. Like I say, if you haven't had a bad presentation, sometimes you need to do another one, right? It's just the way it goes. Thanks, man. I can see it now.
So, okay. So I usually look at the outlier, and I was even pointing to the wrong one. I'm jumping on this kind of thing. Now, again, this is a demo and the whole thing was pretty fast, but I'm looking for these large ones here. In the blog post, it says the blue executes SQL shows when the query was issued until the first row gets returned from the data source. So that's actually good. Glad you called that out. This is kind of data transfer time. And so then this would be execute time, right? So this blue here is the first line. It's the source equal, or, you know, with any data that it has to pull down is going to be registered here. And then, so if I was looking at this, I'm kind of wondering what's going on in these two dimension tables. They're not just pulling data, they're doing a lot of processing too. So I would kind of jump into that and wondering what's going on with that. That's when you end up with that power query that's as long as your arm or something. So make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious to try and play with this myself, because I mean it is interesting, and I mean I've got some performance tools in Monkey Tools that deal with this in Excel, but not doing this, and it's interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I was thinking that as you were talking at the intro, you know, the Excel focus and everything, so that the engine's the same, right? The underlying engine in Excel is the same. I wonder if you could connect to it. I kind of was having that thought about how would you do this in Excel?
Well, I can connect to Power BI from Excel, right? I mean, it's just a connector that we actually use to get through. So whether I'm actually analyzing VertiPack data or whether I'm analyzing Power Query data are two different things, though, because I don't have the flexibility to get what I need from Power Query from Power BI as much as I can. But this is kind of interesting because now I'm looking at going, all right, well, so can I automate it through SQL Profiler? That would be an interesting thing to have me burn some time to try and figure out. If only I had some of that to spare.
Can you connect to that as a port? Like, can you connect to the, what is it, the Power Pivot engine in Excel?
Might be something we want to take offline, but I don't actually need to go and grab the port because I have a direct connection to it because I'm in the same workbook where it already exists. But I can query it with dynamic management views. I will. Good luck with that, Wyatt. So I can still query the model the same way as I do using a Power BI backend. It's harder for me to get to Power BI because I have to go and figure out what the actual port is, and then I can go and connect it. But I actually use the same object model in Monkey Tools for analyzing an Excel model or a Power BI model. Once I've made the connection and stream my data into it, then at that point I can work with it just the same. So
yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
very cool. All right, any other questions? Jocelyn, will let you take another slide and let me try to gather myself and see what's going to crash in the next demo.
Give you a break here. All righty, I'm going to share my screen again.
Dan, there are a couple of questions in the chat that while Jocelyn's sharing here. Any row limitation or amount of limitations on data that can be imported into the data desktop or published to the service?
Yeah, there are, and I think that was answered down there. I love some of the answers. The only limit is your machine's RAM. Boy, is that the truth. Now, remember that the big deal that makes Power BI and Power Pivot so cool is that massive compression that VertiPack brings to the table, right? That's how I got into all this stuff, was like I was trying to look at these huge logs and I was running out of room in Excel and somehow stumbled on like, oh, if you load it into Power Pivot, that limit goes away. And it was like, right? So the compression will really squeeze it down. It's not a one-to-one thing. So when you see a 10 gig model in Power BI, that's huge. That's like 100 gig really, because it's 10-to-1 compression to disk. Pro and premium, I don't know if you know the numbers off the top of your head, Jocelyn. There are specific restrictions in those two categories. I don't remember what they are.
Yep, I think it was 10 gigabytes.
Yeah. So for Pro, you can go up to 10 gig. Now that's compressed 10 gig.
Mm-hmm.
And then premium, you can go, there's another level, isn't there? Or
so keep that in mind when you want to refresh your data sets too, because if you have a really large data set, that it wouldn't work if you needed to, it's in import mode. Because remember, you do have that duplication happening there.
Yes. So realistically, if you're a pro user and you've got a 5 gig model that you're trying to upload, if you try to refresh that, because it doubles while it's refreshing, you'd probably start having problems. Actually, it's probably below that, but cool.
But
good questions.
And it kind of brings me into this next slide too. So we're going to be talking about Power BI and Fabric capacities here. I don't know if I can get my presentation back up on my screen. So we'll dive into a little bit more about Power BI and Fabric capacities here. The very first being shared capacity. This is the default. This is when you first join. This is the first one that you're required to have to publish content. Power BI Pro licenses are required to share content outside of this or in this capacity type. So if you are looking for more capabilities within Power BI, so for example, if you have a really big model that you want to refresh multiple times per day, you can look into Power BI Premium. And this really gives you those more enhanced Power BI capabilities. So you can refresh, I think, up to 8 times per day. I think it's once every 30 minutes or I can't remember off the top of my head. That's bad. I should probably know that. But you can refresh more often with a larger size model every single day. And premium also comes with deployment pipelines. It's not just in relation to your model sizes. There's different capabilities that you can take within Power BI itself if you decide to go with premium. Um, Outside of premium, we also have fabric capacities, and this is relatively new. I say relatively in a loose way, but the fabric capacity provides computing power to meet your customer demand and can be upgraded with additional SKUs. So let's say you are refreshing a big model, but you only want to refresh it once every month, or if you have discrepancies between the time that you want to refresh, or you fluctuate a lot within Power BI, Fabric could be a good method for you because it really depends on how much you use the platform that you will be billed for it. Another thing to note with Fabric capacities, it allows for bursting and smoothing. So if you do go over that threshold for which you've already purchased computing resources, it'll smooth it out so that you can load balance those costs for you. So there's a lot of considerations when we are faced with deciding between fabric capacities, but essentially what this slide is here to do is to bring up the question of why even care about your fabric capacity. And if you have fabric capacities, what does it matter if you have a large data model? Well, a poorly performing Power BI report Power BI report and data model is what this is supposed to say, can affect your entire capacity and tenant, which will incur additional costs. So it could be a little bit costly if you do overconsume resources there. One thing that Dan had briefly mentioned before is the Fabric Capacity app. So this can be used to see which reports are consuming a lot of capacity. But then again, the Fabric Capacity app is very high level at this point. So if you want to take a deeper look into the details of what's going on within your capacity, Azure Log Analytics can help you see all of those details. So what you'll do with Azure Log Analytics is set it up within your workspace so you can see all of the nitty-gritty details that are taking place, all of the actions. But I will hand it over to Dan to explain that a little bit further. Dan, are you ready?
Well, we'll see. I'm a little aware of the time too. I think we're coming, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But so I want to introduce you at least to the Microsoft Fabric Capacity app. This is something that your tenant admin should install and make available. I'm not going to view it as an app. I'm actually going to go to the workspace and look at it. But I just want to kind of fly through it just to give you at least a walkthrough of what you're looking at. Or I'll tell you what, I'll tell you how I look at this as somebody who's in here, chasing performance problems all the time. In the main page that you come to here, I go straight to this graph here because what this is telling me, I've got two different colors here. I've got the blue and I've got the red in the background here. The blue says background percent, and what that means is your capacity that you're looking at, and this is, you're using this if you have a premium capacity. Your capacity is divided into background work and interactive work. I'll split it that way. Background is going to refer to your data set refreshes mostly. That's most of what that background percentage is. And your interactive is more people browsing reports and choosing slicers and all that kind of stuff. So when I have a customer that says they're having performance problems, they're getting emails saying their capacity is at the limit, people are complaining about slow visuals, I usually come here first because I want to see, like, is this something that's constantly happening? If you look at this one, this is our lab environment, so there's no capacity to speak of. I'm pretty sure that was probably me right there, and we'll see if you see the spike that comes up. In this view down here, I don't think this is that useful. I guess it could be. This is over 14 days, right? So if I sort on CUs, I can see that this one was the heaviest used, but that's over a 14-day period, right? That may not be relevant to what's happening right now. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to look for these spikes, and usually it's interactive that we're chasing. So the way you can get more information about that is you click on the spike itself, and it's difficult, but when you get this little dot up here on the timeline, you know that you're on that. And that lights up this explore button here, which is just to drill through. You can also right click this and drill through, but I'm going to click the explore. And what that's going to do is now bring me into that time slice. And I'm going to be looking at a 30-second time slice, but it's going to have information of things that started and were running during that slice and started during the slice and keep running afterwards. So it's a little confusing the way that works. But this kind of gives me an idea of what that looked like in that 30 seconds. Again, you can see I'm way, way, way below on CU percentage. Actually, this wasn't me. This was somebody else that managed to bump that here. But if I'm looking at this interactive section up here, I can see that this is what was going on during that 30-second time slice. And I can do things like sort by total CU. I can see if there's any throttling going on, et cetera, right? It's a little hard because I don't have the best thing to show you here. So this will tell me the workspace. It will tell me what they were doing, paginated reports. Shocker, that took up a ton of CU. And then this item name, this is like the data set, SF prod or MF price, but it really doesn't give me page information and all that kind of stuff that I really would want to see. So what I would turn to next is, let's go here. We're going to go into here. And in this workspace settings, remember, this is right now, it's a workspace by workspace setting. Like I said, they released something at Ignite. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I can, for each one of these workspaces, if I think you need to be a tenant admin to make this connection. I could specify in here, this is a Azure portal subscription and a resource group, and this is my log analytics workspace. Once I connect this, all of that data that you could see in SQL Profiler is just going to be pumped to this log analytics workspace. Log analytics, you are charged on a storage level, so you're charged for how much data you store. So typically, when I'm actively working a problem, I will turn this on and ask the customer to remind me to turn it off afterwards or take notes or whatever, because otherwise it's going to keep piling up there. Some people like that to be constantly on. If you're trying to catch one of those transient things, leaving it on would be a good thing. But once this is here, now I'm going to have this data coming to this log analytics workspace.
Dan, can I interject for one moment?
Yeah, sure.
Apologies. Just an important note, to set up log analytics in your workspace, it needs to be premium capacity.
Yes. Thank you for calling that out. Very good point. You go there and shared and get frustrated because it's not there. So once I've set that up, this is where I'm dumping the issues now. I'll show you what I would do to get into it, even just to start looking at it. So I'm going to go here to logs. Now, let me say at the top here, I don't think it has that switch for me anymore. You may see different view. If you go into logs, it may look different. This is the new view, which I would totally recommend. What pops up first is this queries hub. Power BI, we're used to being a second-class citizen, so just about none of these are Power BI. You can start to save yours. So I have a Power BI performance one that I've saved here that I can run, but I'm going to clear this for right now. So when we just come into it in that new view, it's going to come into this simple mode here. Now it's got a nice query history. These are all the queries I was playing around with. But in simple mode, it's very much like Excel or Power Query. I'm going to click on select a table. It's going to show up under log management, and we get this Power BI datasets workspace. Click on that. And in simple view, it's just going to come up like this. Now, this is the reason I told you to switch to that new view is because the old view didn't have this simple mode. In simple mode, I could come in here and I can filter, I can sort and do all that kind of stuff. So even at this level, I could come in here and start sorting things and seeing what was going on in the data that it's collected here. Note these filters up here. This is going to be applied after the query. So it's going to show me the last 24 hours and it's only going to show me 1,000 rows. That sounds like a lot, but it's not. Sometimes the simplest of just browsing a visual can be a couple hundred lines of code in here. So again, looking in simple mode, I can start to see things here that are pretty interesting. If you're a Power BI/DAX person, when you see VertiPack SE, that's a VertiPack storage engine query ending, this particular line. And you can see this is, if I expand it, this is the data. It's all JSON. So this is a complex JSON array here, but I can drill through it in this view. And so I can see it was in this data set, this report ID, and then hopefully I'll have time to show this. This is kind of brand new. It doesn't tell you a page. It tells you the report and it tells you a visual, which can be frustrating if you have a report with a lot of pages. But you can see right away, this is really getting down into the weeds, right? This is a VertiPack scan. When we were talking about that SQL code that you see inside of DAX Studio, that's the same thing right here. So you're down to as bare metal as you can get with Power BI here. Just to fly through it, I'm going to demonstrate a few simple KQL queries. So that's Custo Query Language. It was written for, is it Azure Data Studio? I think, no, not Azure Data Studio. I don't remember what it was written for, but it's supposedly optimized for querying over large amounts of data. If you saw when I switched from simple mode to KQL mode, all it has is the name of the table, and that's like the most base query. That's giving you everything here. Before I dig, any questions? And can I take 5 minutes more? Everybody okay if I keep going? Azure Data Explorer.
Yep,
Thank you,
go
Gail.
for it.
Okay. First of all, I will say, full disclosure, so much of this you can find out with Copilot, because that's how I learned KQL. Like the attention span, despite being an old man at this point, my attention span is just squeezing down. So I can't open a book and learn KQL. I got Copilot open on my other monitor, and I'm just like, how do I do this in KQL? And it's excellent what it spits out. I'm going to grab a couple queries here. Let's see, what should I do? I think I've got some in the loop here. Let's put this in here. And so this one is going to be, this is what KQL looks like. So here's my table. It's kind of how SQL actually does its queries. You state the table first. Now I'm setting two variables here, start time and end time. I've got this +6H because I don't think in UTC. So that's how I convert my time to UTC. So this is going to be 9:45 in the morning, my time, to 10:15 in the morning. And why do I have that in there twice? It's a dang good question. I don't think I need that. That's because I already had that. Sorry, let me get rid of that. So I'm declaring these variables. I'm saying I want this data where time generated greater than start time. So right away, I can narrow this down to the time that I'm thinking of, right? I could probably go after what we just did, but I think I'm just going to do this kind of sample stuff here. Very quickly, I could sort by, this time period here, and I can start to look at some of these things and see what's going on. The kicker here is any refresh that occurs in that workspace is also going to log all of its data here. So it's not just somebody browsing. You can also do everything that you did in Profiler, you can do in here. There are some more, I think, let's do this. So basically your where statements are, where time generated this, and then I can do operation name, and I'm going to do equals, which I'll never remember each time. I always mess that up. No, not operation end. I'm going to do query end. So if you think about it, if this thing's logging in real time, when it logs a query start, it's not going to have any diagnostic information. It's going to log all the times and everything when it finishes. So I'm looking for query ends. So during this time, these were the queries that ran. And so I can go into these queries here and start to get a sense of, what's the application? Is it a data set? Oh, looky, it was me. MDX query. That's kind of weird. I don't remember doing Excel, but when Excel interacts with Power BI data sets, it's usually MDX. I don't know what the heck I was doing there. But you can see how you can drill into this. And so we've got some sample queries. Maybe I could package those up since we're at such a tight time, but you can absolutely start to do queries against like what is in here. You can see that's straight up DAX, if you recognize the DAX. So you could see how you can log all of this and see what was going on at that time. What was the report? Here's another DAX query. How long did that take to run? How much CU did it take? And then, like I said, it'll tell you the report and it'll tell you a visual ID. And I guess that's another tool to talk about someday, how to evaluate that. But let me try, Jocelyn, let me see if your massive query was here. Can you remind me where you got that from? Remember the one that you gave me that was like huge?
Yes. I don't remember where I got it from. Oh, no. Go ahead.
So this is for Ken, and maybe Ken already knew this, but is it this one here? No, it's share. Once you've got this set up, you can actually export this as an M query or as a connection to a data set. And so once you've got everything dialed in here and you're literally looking at the spot you want to, you can actually pull that information into Power BI. If you click on this, it will save the M query to your clipboard, and then you can literally paste that into Power BI. Let's see here. So it's pretty simple. No, that's not what it did. It didn't post it in my clipboard. It downloaded it here. So let's open that up. So here, this is what it generated. So you can tell that we're connecting to JSON document. This is the workspace here. And then you can see your filters applied here, type mapping, and then this is just how it comes out as a table. So this is pretty cool too. But yeah, so I'm out of time again. Jocelyn, do you remember where that query was from? Because I'm wondering if I could.
Well, there's a couple ways that you can connect to Power BI. You can download that script. You can also export to Power BI. And then there's also it was a packaged Microsoft template file that is actively out there. I think it's on GitHub, that you can download and connect to your log analytics workspace.
Yeah, I think, and so you could see how complex some of these things get just to fly through this, right? So these operations, this is filtering that data on these particular operations. It gets rid of these other ones. Gets rid of the refresh stuff. Remember, I told you that the refresh data is logged in here too. When you see this extend and expand, that's where it's taking those complex arrays that are in that JSON data and expanding it so that you can then put it into columnar format. And so, you could take and see how complex you can get. These queries are pretty wild. What's going on here? I think these are, what did we decide these were? I don't even remember what that was.
Hey, Dan, you're not sharing your screen again, just so you know.
God dang it. It's like you'd think I didn't do this for a living. I got all excited, and so I've been just running through this. So again, let me run through this real quick. So here we're filtering operation names. This is that big query I was talking about. And maybe Ken, should I just send it to you? I think maybe you could pass it on, or we could put it in the chat here if that works, some of these queries. But again, so this is operation name here. I was talking about this extend sources and expand. If you remember, let me just show you this because I think it'll be useful. Notice here, I've sorted the CPU time, and look at that sucker. That's 16 seconds, right? I mean, that's how you can get that stuff to jump out. Oh, it's already got it expanded. Let's just do that and do this. So these blocks here, it's very easy to, but this represents like nested JSON within the JSON file. So if I want to put those into columns in a table, I need to extend them and expand them. So if you're looking at this later, that's what that's doing. And this is pulling out the report ID out of this sources array down here. So yeah, that's a big ugly query, but it really comes back with some pretty interesting information. So this really is, you're lasered in at the bare metal, performance stuff, but sometimes you need to get here. Sometimes all you know is that your capacity is smoking and your executives are whining because their reports are slow and you need to figure this out. And to walk back, we can use that capacity app to see what data set's going on or what workspace, who's using up all that stuff. But to really get further in some of these high volume ones, this kind of approach is really what you have to do is start getting into that log analytics data, turn that on, shove it to log analytics in Portal, and then you can start querying it to find out what actually was using up the CPU. And then you can kick into that next level of ripping apart the DAX, how much rows were returned, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop there. It was a lot longer than 5 minutes. Any more questions? Sorry, we got kind of wheels offy there.
I don't see any other questions in the chat that haven't been answered. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So listen, thanks. I appreciate it. This has been really interesting stuff. It's always interesting to take a look at the different approaches for dealing with things. And I will certainly say, I mean, about the query that you showed, does Ken know? No, I don't have premium capacity where I am, so I haven't actually run into one of those things. So,
okay.
But I think that's one of the things that's quite interesting. I mean, for my world, I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out the optimization at a report level. This goes obviously a lot bigger than that. We're now getting into the whole org and whatnot, which I think takes different tools and whatnot along the way. I can see that we do have someone who's raised their hand. Megan, I don't know if you have a question that you wanted to ask.
Hi. Yes. Yeah. A quick question. So all of these logs will be available after you kind of like activated the logs in the workspace, or it's already available there? You should first do that and then wait for the logs to get logged in, and then later you can query, right?
Yeah, so great question. First of all, you have to have a log analytics workspace that you've created in your Azure Portal environment, right? So once that's created, the scenario would be problems start occurring. Oh, geez, I need to go into the workspace and I'm going to set the workspace up to start logging to that log analytics directory. Once I do that, it's like a good 3 minutes before it starts to show up, 3 to 5 minutes. But as soon as you make that connection, it will start logging it here. You just won't see it immediately. So, and then when you go back in, if you disconnect that workspace again, it stops logging at that point. But the data will stay there unless you went and deleted it or something, cleared it out.
Okay. And it is a lot of data too.
Yeah.
Yeah, notice the 391 pages, or 391 rows. Sorry, I guess it's a page depending on how it goes through it. But and that's like super detailed, right? If we go back to here, last 24 hours, and this honestly, this is a lab. Notice I hit the upper limit, so if I go to max, that's 2,000 rows with probably just 1 or 2 people poking at something here and there. So production environment, that's going to get real big.
Okay, so with using this method, basically you cannot do the kind of like a postmortem analysis, right? So you should be ready for it. You should make a decision if you wanted to take a look, and then you can do this, right?
Yeah, and again, if you have like a super sensitive workspace or something, or one that you've got developers that write with hammers and they're constantly causing problems, you could leave this running, and then it would be available post-mortem to go back and track down. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so in terms of the costing associated to this, can you just provide us a little bit more like insight on that how much costs we should be expecting if we keep this going for a workspace that has a couple of reports in it? But I think you already kind of like answered it, depending on the activities on that.
I'm going to do that frustrating consultant thing and say it depends, because it really does depend. You're literally charged on how much storage you use. So if you have a really slow workspace, it could be minimal. And if you have a really fast one, you could, run up a charge. I would just go kind of experiment, just turn it on, for 10 minutes and see what you get. I think it's on the realm of like what blob storage costs. It's not a huge cost. This isn't super expensive, but it's one of those things that you wouldn't want to just leave it on and forget about it.
Okay. And it doesn't have, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
And then does it have any, so if you're on Fabric capacities, just turning on that log doesn't have any cost associated to the Fabric, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't charge against your capacity. No.
Okay, got it.
As long as that workspace is premium.
Premium. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, very, very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw my email address. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. This is one of these things that, sorry, I had to use it depends. I'm actually doing a lot of work in this right now, and I've got a tool that will show me where that visual ID is on what page in the report, all that kind of stuff. It just, I guess because I fumbled around on the other one, we just ran out of time. But if this is something you're interested in learning more about, just, hit me up on LinkedIn or email me, and I'll be glad to share what I've found.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to both of you for coming and doing this. It's a great way to end off our 2024 on the Power BI group here. To let everybody know that's watching here, I will get the video posted up in the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, if you're subscribed on the Meetup site to this presentation, you'll get a notification there. And if you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you get a notification right away, of course. Thanks again, guys, for doing this. I really appreciate it. Lots of great stuff in there. Hopefully we'll see you guys again at some point.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right, cheers.
Thank you for having us.
Have a good one, folks.
Thank you.
Until next time.